Chapter 1. On the day of delivery, I witnessed my colleague swapping my daughter with hers. I remained silent and quietly switched the two babies back. 18 years later, my colleague showed up at my home arrogantly, claiming her rights. Your daughter Helen is actually my biological daughter. The hospital made a mistake back then. I threw a paternity test right in front of her. Dragons give birth to dragons. Phoenixes give birth to phoenixes. You think you can take my daughter? Keep dreaming. On the day the college entrance exam results were released, my daughter Helen scored 631, and she's an arts student, which means this score is more than enough to get her into the nation's top art college. Relatives and friends came by to congratulate us. Nicole, my colleague, also came by, bringing a box of milk. Seeing Nicole, Helen warmly greeted her godmother, but to everyone's surprise, Nicole grabbed Helen's hand, tears welling in her eyes, and said, "Helen, I'm not your godmother. I'm your real mother. You are my flesh and blood. Come, let's go home." Upon hearing this, the relatives in the house were taken aback. Some whispered, "Is this Nicole out of her mind? Now that Helen's achieved something, she wants to snatch her away?" Exactly. Her own daughter died tragically, so now she wants to take someone else's? Nicole, still clutching Helen's hand, walked up to me with an arrogant attitude. "Diana, I'm going to tell you the truth today. The hospital switched our daughters back then. Helen is my real daughter. As for your daughter, she died in the countryside." I feigned surprise. This can't be true." Nicole sneered, her face full of arrogance. "Diana, don't think just because you're prettier and married better that you'll be lucky forever. You raised my daughter for 18 years, but your own child had a short life. In any case, I'm taking Helen away today." I raised an eyebrow lightly and said, "Nicole, you're claiming Helen is your daughter. Do you have any proof? A paternity test? If you don't, I have one right here." As I spoke, I placed a paternity test from 18 years ago onto Nicole. It clearly shows that Helen and I have a 98% biological match. Helen is my real daughter. Nicole looked at the paternity test, her expression dismissive. She tore the report into pieces. "This must be fake. Diana, you can't fool me. You think you can make up some fake report and separate me from Helen?" I responded, "If you don't believe it, you can always go to the hospital and do another test. But I'm not paying for it. Doing a paternity test costs 3,000 yuan. That amount is less than what my daughter spends on pocket money in a week." However, Nicole has been struggling financially these past 2 years. Her husband got into trouble a few years ago and just got out earlier this year. That man has no job and spends his days drinking heavily at home. Nicole was laid off from her job a couple of years ago and now makes a living by selling fried dough sticks at a street stall. 3,000 yuan would be enough to cover their family's food expenses for 2 months. Humph. It's just money, isn't it? I'll pay for it. Chapter 2. Nicole was certain that Helen was her biological daughter, and she arrogantly mocked me. "Diana. Oh, Diana. I truly pity you now. You've been so clever all your life. Yet you ended up raising my daughter for 18 years in vain. Once the paternity test results are out, Helen will return to her true family, and also, your family's company and assets will naturally belong to my Helen." As she spoke, Nicole grabbed Helen, intending to go to the hospital. I let her make a scene. In the hospital hallway, my husband Luis came rushing down from the elevator, sprinting towards me. "Diana, what on earth is going on?" At that moment, I smiled. Those who are shameless will always get what they deserve. Some people are rushing headlong into being humiliated. How could I not indulge her? The lights in the hospital hallway flickered on and off, and my thoughts drifted far and near. Everything began 18 years ago. Nicole and I were university classmates, and after graduating, we joined the same company. Later, I married the company's boss, Luis. She married her first love, a petty thug named Oliver. Coincidentally, we even got pregnant around the same time. When we gave birth, it was also at the same maternity hospital. I fought for my life, laboring for a whole day and night before giving birth to my daughter, Helen. But later that night, around 1 a.m., my right eyelid kept twitching. and I felt an uneasy sense of panic. I forced myself up and went to the nursery to check on my baby. To my surprise, I discovered something shocking. Nicole had snuck into the nursery and swapped her daughter with mine. I took out my phone and silently recorded everything. After Nicole left, I entered the nursery and switched the babies back. I didn't say a word about it. I wanted to see what Nicole's real intentions were. After we returned home from the hospital, Nicole frequently visited my home. One day she brought a free-range chicken. The next day, a box of crabs. She held my hand and earnestly said, "Diana, we were university classmates, and we're good friends now. You've married so well, and your daughter is so chubby and cute. I just adore Helen the moment I see her. How about I become her godmother?" When Nicole held Helen, she was so cautious. Her eyes filled with gentle affection. But when it came to her own daughter, Nicole wouldn't even breastfeed her. Nicole's daughter, Roma, never had a single drop of her mother's milk from the start. Nicole said, "That little brat I gave birth to is destined for a short life. She wants to drink breast milk? Ha! Even feeding her some millet porridge is more than enough." Nicole laughed wickedly again. "I'm not breastfeeding her. If a woman breastfeeds, her chest will flatten, and then men won't be interested. My Oliver said he likes my full big papayas. Someday, I'll have to give him a son too." Hearing that, I intentionally said, "Then maybe I shouldn't breastfeed my baby either? After all, Luis is the boss, and I have to think about my figure too." Nicole, however, was immediately scared, her lips turning pale, and she shook her head repeatedly. "Diana, how could Helen be the same as my little brat? Your Helen is a golden phoenix. Mine is a born lowlife. Helen must drink breast milk. It's nutritious. Besides, Luis has money. If you want to maintain yourself, you can find plenty of ways to do it." Nicole never called Roma her daughter, only referred to her as a lowlife. Roma never tasted a single drop of breast milk. At 3 months old, she weighed only 6 pounds, scrawny like a little chick. If Roma made even a bit of noise, Nicole would hit her, pinching her hard on her inner thigh. Nicole always bathed Roma in cold water. When the child had a high fever, Nicole never took her to the hospital. She would prick Roma with needles at home, and within a couple of days, Roma ended up with pneumonia. Several times, I saw Nicole abusing Roma like this, and I wanted to confront her directly. Even if I hated Nicole, the child was innocent. But every time I brought up Roma, Nicole would roll her eyes and grin wickedly. My little brat was born to be beaten. The blood of a lowlife flows through her veins. Giving her a bite to eat is an act of mercy. In a few years, I'll sell that brat for a dowry. My daughter looks just like a tramp. That cursed, low-born child isn't worthy of love. While cursing Roma, Nicole would size me up with those crafty eyes. Every time I thought about how Nicole abused Roma, believing she was my biological daughter, I was filled with resentment. Eventually, I gave up on exposing the truth from back then. After that, Nicole even bought an old apartment of about 40 square meters near my villa. She would frequently come to visit Helen, occasionally bringing Roma along. When the 2 children turned 8, it was time for them to start primary school. I enrolled Helen in an international school and hired a private piano tutor to teach her at home. One day, Nicole came to my villa with 2 old hens and brought Roma along. As soon as she entered the door, Nicole called out to me, "Diana, I'm here to visit you. These are old hens from my mom's farm back in the countryside. I specifically brought 2 for you to try." I came downstairs to greet them, and saw Roma, such a small child at 8 years old, her height barely reaching 1 meter. Roma was dressed in dirty, torn clothes, wearing plastic sandals covered in yellow mud. Her left cheek was swollen, and there were bruises all over her body. An 8-year-old child, she hung her head low, barely able to speak a word. I asked the maid to get a pair of slippers. The maid looked at Roma's little dirty feet and couldn't help but frown. This child, her little feet are covered in mud. I'll go get a basin of water and wash her feet before she changes into slippers. The maid meant well. Unexpectedly, Nicole turned around, raised her large hand, and slapped Roma across the face 3 times. Smack, smack, smack. Roma was knocked to the ground, her face swollen and bruised. with blood seeping from the corner of her mouth. Nicole then lifted her leg and kicked Roma in the chest. You worthless beggar. Filthy brat. You're so dirty. Bringing shame to me. I'll beat you to death. Seeing this, I grabbed Nicole's arm. What are you doing? She's just a child. How can you beat her like that? Nicole raised her head to look at me. Her expression twisted between a smile and a sneer. Diana, don't stop me. This kid was born to be beaten. If I don't beat her for 3 days, she'll start causing trouble. The seed is bad. The blood is filthy. Nicole cursed viciously, her words particularly sharp. In Nicole's mind, Roma was my biological daughter. Every time she scolded or beat Roma, she mentioned either her breed or her bloodline. It was clear she was indirectly mocking me. I never understood why Nicole hated me so much. Hearing such cruel words from her, I hardened my expression, unwilling to interfere in her family's affairs. Just then, Helen had finished playing the piano. Helen ran to the doorway and gently helped Roma up. Godmother, why are you hitting Roma? Roma is such a good girl. Come on, let her come inside and play with me. As Helen spoke, she grabbed Roma's small hand. Her eyes filled with pity. The two girls were the same age, and children always had something to talk about when they were together. But Nicole grabbed Roma's hair, yanking her back and slapping her twice on the back of her head. You filthy brat. You think you're worthy of holding Helen's hand? Nicole was furious. Her eyes blazing, she squatted down and spoke to Helen. Helen, you're a lady of great standing. Roma is nothing but a little beast. She's not worthy of playing with you. This beast was born to serve on her knees. Helen, make her kneel on the ground and act as your horse to ride. Helen was startled by Nicole's words, shaking her head in disbelief, her body retreating in fear. I pulled Helen behind me, glaring at Nicole. You can scold your own child, but not in front of Helen. Helen gets scared easily. You might frighten her. Nicole, I won't be keeping you here today. Helen has a ballet class this afternoon, and we need to leave soon. Upon hearing that, Nicole finally nodded slightly and put down the 2 old hens. She repeatedly reminded me, make sure to use these to make chicken soup for Helen. Helen is weak and needs lots of nourishment. Nicole said this as she led Roma out of the house, pulling Roma by her hair as they went, all the while cursing, you little bastard, worthless scum, disgraceful. Don't wander around in front of Helen again. How can you even compare to Helen? Helen is a celestial fairy, and you are just a maggot in the dirt. Hear me, you filthy little brat. Chapter 3. The past floated before my eyes as the lights in the hallway grew brighter. Nicole, eager to have Helen return to her rightful family, had requested an expedited paternity test. It cost over 10,000 yuan. In just half an hour, the results were ready. A healthcare worker approached us with the report in hand. Seeing this, Nicole immediately rushed forward and snatched it away. Her eyes were filled with smugness, and she said in a mocking tone, "Oh, the results are in. Diana, it's time for you to admit defeat. Helen, after all, is my biological daughter. Some people are only meant to give birth to lowlifes." Seeing Nicole's overly smug expression, an indescribable sense of anger and sadness rose in my heart. I asked myself why. I had known Nicole for so many years and had never done anything to wrong her. I truly didn't understand why Nicole hated me so much. At that moment, Nicole continued speaking with pride. When Luis's father died, he made it very clear, 80% of the company's shares would go to Helen, and as for the villa and the savings, they were also transferred to Helen's name after he died. Now that Helen is my biological daughter, all that money belongs to us. Nicole's eyes gleamed with calculation. Indeed, my husband's family was wealthy. They had been in business since my father-in-law's generation. My father-in-law was initially a university professor, but he later resigned to start a business in construction materials, which brought him great wealth. Luis inherited his father's business, and to this day, our family still works in the construction materials industry. My father-in-law was a very kind man. He only had one son, Luis. In his life, after I gave birth to Helen, he held her every day, unwilling to let go, wanting to give her the best of everything. A few years ago, my father-in-law passed away from cancer. At that time, My mother-in-law had also been gone for many years. It was my husband's own idea to tell my father-in-law that the inheritance should be directly given to Helen. Luis and I are very career-focused, and we would never live poorly. Besides, even if we earned mountains of gold and silver, wouldn't it all be left to our children in the end? It seems that Nicole had been coveting our family's wealth for quite some time. She had been calculating all of this silently for years. At that moment, I clenched my fists tightly, my nails nearly digging into my palms, yet I still tried my best to remain calm and composed. Nicole shook the paternity test report in front of me, as if flaunting her victory. I took a deep breath, snatched the report from her, and carefully read every word. Then, I raised an eyebrow and smiled. Nicole, it seems you haven't actually read this paternity test. Nicole immediately rolled her eyes dramatically. Is there even a need to read it? I remember very well that back when the two children. Nicole suddenly paused. Humph. Either way, Helen is my biological daughter. That can't be faked. As she spoke, Nicole reached out and snatched the report back. She slowly opened the report and read it word by word. Joe, Helen and Nicole's paternity test result excludes a biological relationship, not a biological mother-daughter relationship. Chapter 4. Nicole's face turned ashen in an instant. Her eyes widened as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. This is impossible. Impossible! Nicole screamed like she had lost her mind. I smiled, taking the report and reminding her. The genetic match is less than 99.6%. And you still dare say Helen is your child? Nicole, I think you've gone hysterical. Have you gone crazy because my Helen is now an excellent student? At that moment, Oliver also rushed to Nicole's side. He snatched the report, his fingers trembling as he flipped through the pages. Suddenly, Oliver lost it, punching and hitting Nicole. You damn woman. What the hell is going on? Didn't you say Helen was our biological child? Why doesn't the test result match? While beating Nicole, Oliver kept shouting filthy curses. God damn it. You stupid woman. You useless idiot. This paternity test cost over 10,000 yuan. And now this is what we get. Damn it! Nicole cried out in pain as Oliver beat her, screaming in desperation. No. This is impossible. Her voice trailed off, eventually turning into a helpless whimper. Suddenly, Nicole mustered all her strength and lunged at me, grabbing my collar. Diana, this report is fake. You must have bribed the hospital. It's impossible. Helen is clearly my biological daughter. Diana, you're nothing but a piece of trash for using such low tactics. I broke free from Nicole's grip. Nicole, are you out of your mind? Let me tell you, the paternity certificate is right here, and Helen is my biological daughter. From now on, go crazy all you want, but stop disturbing my family. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude. As I spoke, I turned around and walked away with my husband and daughter. Ha! She thought she could take what's mine, as if she could ever be worthy. Chapter 5. After returning home, Helen was still shaken by today's events. Even Luis was full of questions. I knew Nicole well. We had shared a dorm room during college. She was always the type to stir up trouble for no reason. Even with the paternity test results in front of her, I knew Nicole wouldn't let us off that easily. I immediately booked Helen a plane ticket abroad. I wanted her to take a trip to Europe before starting university. That evening, after his shower, Luis sat alone on the bed in our bedroom. He waved at me, worry etched on his face. Diana, what's the deal with your friend? Why would she suddenly say the hospital mixed up the babies all those years ago? The baby swapping incident had happened 18 years ago. I had kept it buried deep in my heart, never even telling Luis. That night, I told Luis everything about how Nicole had secretly swapped our babies after I gave birth 18 years ago. That night, after I gave birth, your mother fell ill. During the day, you took care of her while also looking after me. At night, you lay on the small hospital bed beside me, sleeping like a dead log. I don't know why, but that night my right eyelid kept twitching. When I went to the nursery, I found Nicole had swapped our babies. I immediately switched them back. After hearing everything, Luis patted his chest in shock. My God! Nicole's intentions were so vicious. Diana, Why didn't you tell me all of this all these years? Luis continued. No wonder Nicole was always hitting and scolding her daughter. Poor Roma. What a tough life she's had. She wasn't even in school at 10 years old. And later, that incident happened. Over the years, Nicole had treated her daughter, Roma, like an animal. When Helen was 8, she went to an international primary school. But even when Roma turned 10, Nicole refused to send her to school. The community officer went to their home several times. Nicole stubbornly refused, making all sorts of excuses. Roma, that poor child, was so thin and weak, her large eyes always filled with fear. It wasn't until the local police officer got involved and firmly insisted that Nicole send her child to school. Roma could only attend an ordinary public elementary school. During the day, she went to classes, but at night she had to wash clothes and cook at home. I heard that during those years, Roma lived in the bathroom of her house. There was a folding iron bed placed behind the toilet. Only at night could Roma open up the folding bed and lie down on the hard surface to sleep. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, Oliver would come to use the bathroom and unbuckle his belt right in front of Roma. A few years later, Roma grew up into a young lady. One day, she was squatting at my doorstep, wiping her tears with her hand. I approached to ask her what was wrong, and Roma hugged my legs and burst into tears. It turned out that the previous night, Oliver had drunk too much, and when he went to use the bathroom in the middle of the night, he tried to take advantage of Roma. Even though Roma wasn't my biological daughter, and I had hated Nicole all these years, that time I truly couldn't hold back. I called Nicole over to my house and gave her a proper scolding. I told her that Roma was still just a child, and what Oliver did was a crime. If she really couldn't afford to raise this girl, our family could take care of 2 daughters. I was willing to take Roma as my goddaughter and let her live in our house from then on. But as soon as Nicole heard that I wanted to recognize Roma as my goddaughter, she refused. She kept saying, "Oh, Diana, how could you believe what that little wretch in our family says? All this talk about touching and harassment, it's all nonsense from that little wretch. Our Oliver is not like that." Nicole went on. "Who is Roma? She's just a slut, a worthless creature. Don't be fooled by her. She doesn't deserve to live in such a good house. Just look at her. With that pathetic look, her blood is filthy. How could she be worthy of being Helen's sister?" That day, Nicole dragged Roma away, forcefully pulling her back home. Since then, I haven't seen Roma again. I heard that Nicole sent Roma to the countryside. In the countryside, a young and beautiful girl like Roma attracted the unwanted attention of many rough men. Nicole even instructed those villagers to climb into Roma's bed, each time paying them a red bill. Later, another 2 years passed. It seemed like Roma fell ill, and Nicole sold her to a crippled old man in the village. That old man was a pervert who had tortured 3 wives to death. Last year, news came that Roma had died miserably in the countryside. Luis, how desperate must Roma have been to have such a mother? I choked on my words. Luis held my hand tightly, his eyes filled with anger. Diana, Nicole and Oliver are both despicable people. Actually, there's something I've been hiding from you for many years. Chapter 6. What is it? I asked. Only then did Luis murmur. Do you remember? Back in the day, when you and Nicole both graduated from university and started as interns at my company? At that time, I had just taken over the company. It was small, and we saw each other every day. Actually, from the first time I saw you, I fell in love at first sight. I thought to myself, how can this girl be so fair-skinned? Her smile is so sweet. If I could marry such a beautiful girl, even if we did nothing else but look at her smile every day, I'd die happy. But who would have thought? During the time I was pursuing you, Nicole secretly came to see me once. What did she want? I asked eagerly. Luis looked a bit embarrassed and said, She arranged a meeting at a hotel in your name. She wore a black lace nightgown, trying to throw herself at me. I was so scared that I turned to run. But then, Nicole said a lot of bad things about you that day. She said that you were a mess in university, that you had dated more than 10 boyfriends, and that you had had 3 abortions, with her accompanying you to the hospital each time. She said you were not serious, and warned me to be careful not to be fooled by your looks. The more I listened, the angrier I became. It was Nicole herself who had the abortions. She was involved with Oliver back in high school. When she went to university, she was sneaking out every night. She was clearly trying to smear my reputation. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Pouting in frustration, Luis, on the other hand, wrapped his arm around my shoulder, trying his best to comfort me. I raised an eyebrow and glanced at Luis, then slowly asked, "Even after all that Nicole said about me, why did you still pursue me back then?" Luis grinned mischievously. "I didn't believe her. I knew in my heart who you really were, and I trusted what I saw with my own eyes. Besides, back then, I was head over heels for you. I was so captivated that even if you were really just after my money, I wouldn't have minded." It was late at night. The moonlight shone through the curtains, illuminating our faces. Fortunately, I married a dependable man, and so, the night passed without sleep. Chapter 7. Early the next morning, we bought a plane ticket for Helen. Luis has a distant cousin, a woman in her 40s who has always been single and has no children. She usually adores Helen. We arranged for Helen to go on a trip abroad with her cousin. Once the child was out of the way, Luis and I could take care of business back home. Who would have thought that just after Helen left, Nicole and her husband Oliver barged into our house in a whirlwind. "Diana, where's my daughter?" Nicole barged in, hands on her hips, full of fury. At that moment, my husband and I were having lunch. Luis frowned as soon as he saw Nicole and Oliver. I slammed my chopsticks on the table. "Nicole, are you out of your mind? The paternity test report is out. Helen is my biological daughter." But it seemed like Nicole didn't hear a word I said. Oh, Diana, still being stubborn, huh? "You may not know what happened back then, but I know very well. Don't think hiding Helen is going to get you anywhere. Helen is my biological daughter, and that's an indisputable fact. Diana, I advise you to be sensible and pack your things. Get out of this house. This villa is going to be mine." Nicole spoke while dragging Oliver with her, both wearing dirty shoes covered in yellow mud. Wandering around my house, Oliver looked around and commanded, "This villa isn't bad, but the decor is a bit old-fashioned. When we take over, we'll knock down the maid's room on the first floor and turn it into a gym. And that big room upstairs will be for my mom." Luis and I exchanged a look full of disbelief and anger. Luis finally couldn't stand it any longer and got up, staring coldly at Nicole and Oliver. "Nicole, you two are going too far. We've already made it very clear about Helen, and the paternity report is right here. What more do you want? Don't think you can just barge into someone else's home and take whatever you want." Nicole remained unfazed, continuing to wander around the living room as if she already owned the place. "Diana, do you think you can keep anything like this? Let me tell you, don't think I don't know, you tampered with the paternity test. This villa is in Helen's name, isn't it? Since it's in my daughter's name, it naturally belongs to me, her mother. Diana, Luis, if you have any sense, you should pack up and get out." By this point, Oliver was sitting very comfortably on my sofa, smoking a cigarette, carelessly flicking ash all over the floor. He even picked up the remote control to turn on the TV, acting completely at home. I couldn't take it any longer and called security directly. In no time, the community security arrived. Seeing them, Nicole didn't back down. Instead, she became even more arrogant. "Oh, you called security? What? You want to kick us out? I'm telling you, Diana, today, whether you like it or not, we're coming in." I pointed directly at Nicole and told the security guards, "This is my house. They are trespassing." As I spoke, I had Luis go get the property deed. Luis and I have lived in this villa for 18 years. The security guards and gatekeepers know us well. "You too. What exactly do you want here? This is private property. If you do not have a legal reason to enter, we have the right to call the police." Hearing that they might call the police, Nicole suddenly looked a bit flustered, but she still tried to act composed. "Call the police? Fine. Go ahead. I'd like to see if the police would be on your side or ours." Helen is my daughter, that's an indisputable fact. Even the security chief had never seen a woman as unreasonable as Nicole. In the end, they had no choice but to forcibly remove them. Several security guards stepped forward, lifted Nicole and Oliver, and dragged them out of my villa. After that, Nicole didn't come around to make trouble for several days, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling growing inside me. Until one day, Luis called me from the office. Chapter 8. Diana. Bad news. Nicole's been spreading lies online, and now our company's stock is plummeting. I immediately opened my phone to check the internet, and found out that Nicole had started a live stream account. She was crying online, claiming that we had taken her child and wouldn't return her. Nicole sobbed dramatically, pleading her case online. My good friend wasn't decent even when we were in school. She always wanted to compete with me in everything. Later, she married a wealthy man. Even during pregnancy, she had to do it at the same time as me. 18 years ago, we both gave birth at the same hospital, but due to negligence, the hospital switched our babies. Now, my friend refuses to return my daughter to me. I've been separated from my own child for 18 years. My heart is breaking. Nicole portrayed herself in the live stream as a pitiful mother, someone who had been tirelessly searching for her biological child, only to be denied reunion in the end. Many viewers online began to sympathize and comment. Could it be that the hospital switching the babies was done on purpose? This is just too sad. That friend of yours doesn't sound decent. Could it be that her child isn't even her husband's? Maybe she swapped them on purpose. This so-called friend is just too despicable. The babies were switched, and now that the biological mother has come forward, the child should be returned to her rightful family, not allowing the child to recognize her real mother. That's just cruel. That vicious woman deserves to be cut to pieces. The comments online were overwhelmingly one-sided. Occasionally, there were a few more rational comments questioning what was really going on with the other woman. But whenever Nicole saw such comments, she would delete them immediately. Nicole portrayed herself as incredibly pitiful online, and in just a few days, she already had over 1 million followers. At the same time, Luis and I had our personal information exposed by the netizens. They found out about Luis's company and learned that he was the owner and major shareholder of the entire business. Now, in just a few days, the stock price of Luis's company had started fluctuating significantly. Because of this, Luis had lost 2 major deals. Luis spoke helplessly over the phone. Diana, what are we supposed to do now? Nicole and Oliver are spreading lies online. Just this morning, I lost 2 deals, amounting to over 3 million. Hearing this, I smiled slightly. Honey, don't worry. Let the dust settle first. Justice will be served in due time. The more arrogant Nicole is now, the harder she'll fall in the end. Chapter 9. After comforting Luis for a while, I hung up the phone. Then, I opened my phone and watched some of the videos Nicole had posted online. They were all completely twisted, accusing us of taking her child. 2 of these videos had gone viral, reaching millions of views. Seeing this, I secretly created a new account on my phone. Then I sent Nicole a private message. The message contained a link to a highly popular provincial TV mediation show. This show had very high ratings, and every guest who appeared would receive a payment of 10,000 yuan. As expected, when Nicole saw the private message, she took the bait. She immediately contacted the mediation show and began promoting her tragic story, hoping to use the media to get her child back. 3 days later, the show's producers reached out to Luis and me, asking if we would be willing to participate in the show's recording. I agreed without hesitation. On the day of the recording, Luis and I arrived at the TV station right on time. As soon as the recording began, Nicole fell to her knees in front of me in the studio, crying her eyes out, banging her head on the floor. Diana, I beg you, please give Helen back to me. Helen is my flesh and blood, the child I carried for 10 months. Even though the hospital made a mistake back then, both of our families were victims. But I've been separated from my biological daughter for 18 years. I'm begging you, give my child back to me. I had to admit, Nicole's acting was quite impressive. Her act of playing the victim moved both the guests and the audience to tears. The show had only been airing for less than 10 minutes, and many in the audience were already cursing me to no end. Some extreme fans even threw empty water bottles onto the stage. But at this moment, I wasn't angry at all. I simply spoke slowly, saying just one sentence. You say Helen is your daughter. Then where is my daughter? Nicole's body visibly tensed when she heard my words. At that moment, Oliver suddenly stood up. Oliver shouted at the top of his lungs. Roma had bad luck. She died in the countryside. Didn't you already know? At this point, one of the show's guests chimed in. That's right. Before the show, we went over their family situation. Their daughter Roma, who is your biological daughter, wasn't well from a young age. Due to her health, she dropped out of high school in her first year to return to the countryside to recover. But in the end, she still died there. At that moment, my expression remained unchanged. Holding the microphone, I stood up in front of everyone. Today, the first thing I want to do is not talk about whether Helen is Nicole's daughter. Instead, I want to introduce a new friend to the audience. As I spoke, I clapped my hands. Then, I turned towards the backstage and shouted, Roma, come out! Chapter 10. With my call, a girl in a white dress, with a thin, frail figure and haggard face, slowly walked out from the backstage. Her eyes were filled with rage, and her right leg was visibly crippled. Holding the microphone, I spoke slowly to everyone. This is Roma, the daughter who, according to Nicole, had died in the countryside. My voice was calm, though tears filled my eyes. Seeing Roma, both Nicole and Oliver were clearly caught off guard. Their faces instantly turned tense. At that moment, the audience erupted in an uproar. The audience's gaze shifted back and forth between Roma and me, as murmurs filled the air. Wasn't that girl named Roma supposed to be dead? Why is she on stage? That young girl doesn't look sick. She looks like she's been abused. Look at her right leg. It seems like it was crippled by violence. Why is she so skinny? Look at her arms. It looks like there are bruises on them. At this moment, Roma stood under the spotlight. Her fists were clenched tightly, her nails nearly digging into her flesh. I walked over to Roma and handed her the microphone. Roma took the microphone and spoke slowly and deliberately. Hello, everyone. I am Roma. I am not sick. Here today, I want to formally report this. Nicole and Oliver have abused their own daughter, trafficked women, and used their daughter for illegal profit. It was them. They were the ones who married me off to a perverted old bachelor in the village, just to get 5,000 yuan. My leg was broken while I was trying to escape from that pervert. Today, we are here to expose the true, despicable nature of this couple. Nicole and Oliver are the most irresponsible, cruel, and heartless parents in this world. That's right. Roma was not dead. I had saved her. Back when Nicole sent Roma to the countryside, I knew that the child would suffer there. Even though Roma was not my biological daughter, I couldn't bear to see a young girl destroyed during what should have been the prime of her life. I secretly contacted a security company and had them go to the village to rescue Roma. But by the time my team found Roma, her leg had already been broken, and she was thrown into a pigsty, left with the pigs, skeletal and in a condition worse than death. I paid that old pervert 100,000 yuan out of my own pocket to bring Roma back. I also made sure that the old pervert spread the word that Roma was dead. After all, only a dead person could not be further exploited by Nicole and Oliver. As the audience saw Roma's pitiful condition and listened to her testimony, anger boiled among everyone. Yet, even then, Nicole was still stubbornly unrepentant. She pointed at Roma, screaming hysterically, "What does your suffering have to do with me? Blame it on not being my biological child. Blame it on being Diana's bastard." Nicole roared furiously. "Diana, even if you've found Roma, what can you do about it? It doesn't change the fact that Helen is my biological daughter. Diana, let me tell you something. 18 years ago, right when the two children were born, I switched our daughters. All these years, the one I have abused and mistreated has always been your child. Whenever I thought about Roma being your daughter, I wanted to torture her. I wished she would just die." As Nicole spoke, she even tilted her head back and laughed maniacally. "Diana, does it hurt now? Helen, whom you painstakingly raised for 18 years, is my child. and your daughter has been tormented by me every day. Do you know what kind of life she had in the countryside? It was worse than that of pigs and dogs. Ha 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 ha. Diana, you can't beat me, you will never beat me. At this moment, I looked at Nicole, her face twisted with malice. I walked slowly up to her, speaking calmly. Nicole, for so many years, I've always wanted to ask you, what did I ever do to make you hate me this much? Nicole stared at me intensely, as if she wanted to devour me alive. Her emotions shifted from agitation to frenzy, and she finally roared in a fit of madness. You ask me why I hate you? Ha ha ha. I just hate you. Diana, we were both classmates in college. We both came from the countryside. Clearly, we were the same, so why should you have a better life than me? Why, when we were in school, did all the boys like you? They all sent you love letters, and even the counselor favored you. Scholarships, grants, they all went to you. And I had to eat instant noodles every day and work part-time everywhere. Later, after we graduated and joined the same company as interns, you were able to marry the boss and live the life of a rich wife. But what about me? I worked tirelessly, putting in my all at the company for years. And then a few years ago, your husband fired me. Why? Why should it be like this? I just hate you, Diana. I will never let you have a better life than me. You don't deserve it. You don't deserve it. It turned out, it was all just because of jealousy. I stood in front of Nicole and spoke indifferently. I have a better life than you. Not because I'm prettier than you or because you have bad luck. It's because I am capable, and I work hard enough. We may both come from the countryside. But when we were in school, you spent every day busying yourself with Oliver. Meanwhile, I got up every morning at 4 a.m., went to the library at 5 a.m. to study. The scholarships, the grants, they were all earned by me. As for why Luis chose me, it wasn't for my looks but for my character. Nicole, do you have any admirable qualities? Is there anything about you worth liking? And you know very well why my husband fired you 3 years ago. You tried to cut corners and falsified accounts. You embezzled over 200,000 yuan from the company. Luis was the one who covered for that loss. Nicole, the suffering you have experienced is what you deserve. Everything you have faced is of your own doing. At that, I turned my head slightly toward the host. Host. Earlier I provided a video to the show. Now, you may play it. Chapter 11. Upon hearing my words, the host immediately signaled for the staff to play the video. In just a moment, the large screen at the TV station began showing a piece of surveillance footage. This video was from 18 years ago, the very night when Nicole and I gave birth. It showed Nicole sneaking into the nursery, switching the babies. After that footage, there was another video recorded on my phone. In my video, I could be seen walking into the nursery after Nicole left, switching the babies back to their original places. Following that was the paternity test certificate for me and my daughter Helen. As everything played on the screen, Nicole's face turned ashen. She widened her eyes, looking at me in disbelief. You, how could you? Her words became fragmented, her voice trembling uncontrollably. I looked at her coldly and continued. Did you think what you did was flawless and that no one would ever find out the truth? You were wrong. From the moment you switched the babies, I knew everything. This can't be. Nicole's voice rose, her face full of shock. I said, so, Nicole, now you know. Helen has always been my biological daughter, and your child, your daughter, is Roma. All these years, the one you and Oliver abused, tormented, and sold was always your own daughter. Nicole, this is your karma. Nicole's body began to tremble, and she seemed like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. At that moment, Oliver realized what was happening too. His eyes instantly turned bloodshot, and his emotions became frenzied. Like a madman, Oliver rushed toward Nicole, kicking and punching her. You filthy woman! Didn't you say that Roma was Diana's kid? That Helen was ours? You bitch. This is all your fault. It's all because of you. Damn it. I'm gonna kill you today. Kill you! Oliver's fists rained down on Nicole, who curled up on the floor, covering her head with her hands, screaming in agony. Bruises and blood quickly covered her face and body. The surrounding staff and audience were stunned by the scene. The host rushed forward to try to stop Oliver, but he was in a state of madness, unable to hear anyone. As I watched everything unfold before me, I felt no sympathy at all. After a while, several security guards finally rushed forward, pinning Oliver to the ground. He continued to struggle and roar, but it was futile. Nicole lay on the ground, gasping for air. At that moment, the police cars had already arrived at the TV station's entrance. Before today's recording, I had already called the police in advance. Before the police officers took Nicole and Oliver away, I walked up to Nicole and spoke one final sentence. Nicole, for daring to steal my daughter. All of this today is what you deserve. You deserve nothing less. After speaking, I turned away coldly, not giving Nicole another glance. Chapter 12. The police escorted Nicole and Oliver into the police car, both of them stumbling as they were taken away, leaving behind a scene of chaos and murmurs from the audience. After the recording at the TV station, it was Roma, their own biological daughter, who took Nicole and Oliver to court. Roma collected evidence, along with the countless scars on her body. All of this served as the best proof of Nicole and Oliver's abuse. Afterward, Nicole and Oliver were sentenced to 3 years in prison for child abuse. Oliver, who had a violent nature, got into fights in prison as well. In the end, he was disciplined by a prison leader, and less than half a year later, he died in custody. As for Nicole, since being locked up, she had been constantly shouting about wanting to see Roma, but Roma never agreed to see her. Roma only left Nicole a letter, with 3 words written in red ink, "You deserve it." Once the case was over, I found Roma in private and apologized to her. Roma, I'm so sorry. If I had revealed the truth earlier, you wouldn't have had to suffer all these years. When Roma heard my words, she just shook her head expressionlessly. No, even if Nicole and Oliver knew I was their biological child, they wouldn't have treated me well. They wanted Helen as their daughter not because they loved her, but only for your family's wealth. I lived with them for over 10 years, I know them well. Beasts have no heart. I gave Roma a bank card with over 800,000 yuan on it, as compensation for what she had endured all these years. But Roma returned the card to me. Later, she changed her name and left the city alone. From that moment on, I never saw her again. Nicole, after being imprisoned, lost her mind in the 7th month. She held a small pillow in her arms every day, rocking it back and forth. My daughter, my good daughter. Roma, mommy won't switch you anymore. Roma, come, mommy will feed you. Roma, Roma. Meanwhile, Luis, Helen, and I were already on a plane. Helen was about to start school soon. The 3 of us sat on the plane, looking out at the azure sky, dreaming of a beautiful future.